That experts have found a correlation between the use of technology and anxiety. Shocking, huh? Well, to most, not actually, because most of us recognize that the use of our phones is probably not the healthiest thing, especially amongst kiddos. And the reality is that we're introducing technology younger and younger. This problem is not just a kid problem or an adult problem. It affects everyone, especially teens. Teens are a very interesting demographic where they're going through a lot of shifts and changes and can often be overlooked, especially when we focus on pediatric concerns and then adult concerns. And that can be an interesting time, especially teens experience a really high rate of anxiety, especially with the pressures of doing well in school, what their next steps are, and potentially going off to college. So that's a very interesting and fascinating demographic, especially when it comes to technology, because I think that the prevalence and the impact of social media at that point is also very significant. So in today's digital age, how is that impacting our mental health? Well, there was a psychologist named Jonathan Haidt, and he argues that smartphones and social media are a big part of what's led to this mental health crisis amongst young adults, but actually amongst everybody. We're seeing it. We're seeing the highest rates of these things. And this is because we're really in this digital world where everything we have revolves around technology. That technology being impacted would impact almost every part of our daily lives, which is wild and significant to think that it's something that is so integral into our daily lives, into every part of what we're around, and how it's impacting us and the capacity that that's impacting us. It's not just saying, okay, well, a little bit of screen time here and there. It's saying, what's the impact of Wi-Fi in our environment? The fact that almost all of our devices are running off of Wi-Fi these days. The fact that we strap on smartwatches and technology that we keep on our body 24/7. The fact that we always have our phones on us, etc. It's not just saying, okay, a little bit of screen time here and there, but it's saying this is something that is everywhere in our environment. And how is that continuing, the increase in that continuing to impact us? And so what's going on? So right now, we know that depression has increased since 2010, has increased in teens 145% in girls and 161% in boys, which is also really interesting because mental health has been something that women oftentimes seek more assistance in because women are more likely to recognize different needs, etc. And men tend to feel like it kind of takes, even in chiropractic, it kind of takes them crawling in pain to kind of start to reach out for some assistance. So it's really interesting to find that in teens, actually the rate of anxiety is increasing more so in boys than in girls. And I think this is really saying that, especially when we talk about the roles of femininity and masculinity, it's something that we're really recognizing that healthy masculinity is recognizing also you're taking care of your body, your mental health, your physical health, emotional health, etc. So that's really interesting. So that's depression. Anxiety and mental illness in college students has increased 134%. And depression has increased 106%, and that's in college students. And that's a big shift in life, a transition period in life too. And so it's saying, how are we supporting mental health in these transition phases? And oftentimes during these transition phases, when we're going through these different things, how are we turning to technology to help support us as potentially as a coping mechanism? Or we're on technology more often potentially in college because we're writing papers, etc., doing homework, things like that. Anxiety is up though across all ages. And so at its most, it's up 139% between 18 and 25. And so that's kind of why we're talking about teens and young adults in college, because that's really this point where we're seeing this staggering jump. But that is not mutually exclusive from the jump we're seeing across everybody. In 2023, a study of American college students found that 37% reported feeling always anxious or anxious most of the time. 31% said half the time. And so only a third of college students said never. And so 2/3 of college students are experiencing anxiety at least half the time. And 50% is a significant amount. 50% of your days feeling anxiety is significant. And so for that to be at 2/3 are feeling it at least half the time, what is going on and what is contributing to this? And so it's interesting because a study actually found that teens who spent more than 3 hours on social media per day had high rates and high levels of depressive symptoms compared to those who spent 30 minutes or less. And so there's this direct correlation with technology, but especially social media. Social media is designed to trigger dopamine. And dopamine is our happy hormone. Dopamine is where we get excitement, things like that from. And it's interesting because dopamine is directly related to ADHD, which we're also seeing in a staggering rise in ADHD symptoms, but that's another video. So the way social media is designed is they want to create an addiction. They want you coming back, and they want you to keep scrolling and keep you scrolling for hours. That's why there's an algorithm. The algorithm is specifically designed to trigger stuff that you're interested in, so it pops up. And so we have dopamine. And so by the way social media is designed is for everything to be stimulating. And so when we're scrolling, everything is visually stimulating, colorful, sounds, especially now that there's Reels and TikTok, and everything is creating this stimulatory effect on the brain. And so it's just dopamine, dopamine, dopamine. And the way we find coping mechanisms are wherever we typically find this dopamine hit, especially if you lean on the ADHD side and some neurodivergence there, then it's definitely going to be your brain's going to crave dopamine. And so this is like we're looking for these stimulatory things, and that can be a coping mechanism where we can find it can almost be something where it actually helps us relax when we're stressed out because we're stimulating the brain. And so, that's what's also creating, though, the fact that it keeps us coming back for more, keeps us going longer, and really that eventually wears us down. So that actually is overstimulating, and then we're seeing the impacts of that overstimulation, where everything in our environment is trying to trigger and to stimulate. And this is when we really start to see some of the cascades of other things, because our brains are very intricately wired with dopamine, serotonin, melatonin. And so we really see that this is playing a big role, especially in social media. Screen time in general has increased since the mid-2000s. And so this is something where we're seeing this correlation between screen time since the mid-2000s has skyrocketed, and so has mental health disorders. And that's something that even the World Health Organization has recognized, that the mental health, especially amongst young adults, but mental health has been something that we're seeing staggering increases in struggles amongst all individuals, but especially teens. And that's a direct correlation to the fact that we also are increasing our screen time significantly. And so screen time has gone up, and at the same time, we're also seeing a rise in mental health. And so how are these continuing to overlap, especially since really we're seeing the teens and young adults being the most significant increase. Another study looked at how it actually would be best for schools to ban smartphones because of their ability to because banning smartphones would be able to protect students from cyberbullying. And so that's another aspect where not only are we seeing that dopamine reaction in our brain, not only are we getting the overstimulation, but we're also seeing that socially it's very difficult, especially in those years where you're really trying to navigate social skills, and your social construct is such an integral part of your life. And that's something where we know, and across all ages. We know people are willing to say anything on social media. It's like people are willing to be a troll, people are willing to be a keyboard warrior, people are willing to attack people in all sorts of ways, which is really sad because we've really lost a level of that humanity in things, where people are willing to say things that we wouldn't otherwise say in person, but they're willing to say it online, and how that's affecting our mental health, especially because it's very vulnerable for us to put this information out online for really anyone to see. And so in what world or what society prior to social media and prior to the internet were we really kind of broadcasting our lives to so many people? And on the flip side of that too, when were we getting as much information as we're getting now about the whole world globally? And so not only are we seeing more information and we're in the know about so many more things, especially negative things that are happening in the world, but then we're also sharing our own lives with so many more people and being really vulnerable in that. And that's when we're susceptible to these keyboard warriors or to cyberbullying or different things like that, because we're really sharing so much more. And it's interesting how that may be also impacting us. We're putting so much more out there for the world to see, but then we're also consuming so much more than we're probably supposed to know about or supposed to be able to consume. We should have our society or our community construct or our community, and we should be able to kind of know what's going on in that community, but should we really be able to know everything in the entire world all at once at our fingertips? Or is that too much information for us to be able to truly be able to process and to understand? And so what's interesting is really, like, we're seeing what's almost called the great rewiring of childhood, where technology is being introduced younger and younger. It's clearly impacting our brain. It's clearly designed, even kids shows these days, the amount of color, the amount of sound, the amount of action that's happening, or even kids' toys, like very colorful, very bright. They have lights, they have sound. All of these things are designed very specifically to stimulate the brain and to create that dopamine release. And really, how much are we being overstimulated? But so since we're seeing the introduction of technology younger and younger, and we're really seeing kids that are really even hooked to technology younger and younger, how is that impacting the rewiring of their brain? How is that changing potentially how their brains are developing, especially when we're introducing technology in some of the most fundamental years of growth and development? And so how is that impacting, and how is that something that is going to be a contributing factor to how we're, like, mental health or even different health concerns that we're continuing to see as kids get older, and the younger and younger, noticing some of these things pop up younger and younger. So that's the great rewiring of childhood. How are we impacting the brain by introducing these things so young? And so especially because after COVID, I think we really saw that things, like, we became very, very attached and very, very hooked to technology and to our phones specifically. And I think during a very challenging time for everybody, a more stressful time, people turn to their stress coping mechanisms. And oftentimes, if you find yourself kind of mindlessly scrolling to really kind of almost to numb out your brain, then that's considered a coping mechanism. And so some of our biggest coping mechanisms we do in society now are like binge watch Netflix or scroll, because it's really a way for our mind to kind of check out because we're so overwhelmed, and that instead of really being able to truly relax, we kind of just create these things where it kind of mimics our brain's ability to kind of be mindless for a little while. And that's really a sign of high cortisol and high stress. And so really what we're seeing is a ton of these issues where we're seeing, mental health. And it's interesting because another key component is that kids are supposed to be able to face difficult situations to build resilience. And since we're living in a world that's more and more revolving around technology, we're living in a world where we're not experiencing maybe some of those natural social interactions, maybe going outside and playing and falling and maybe potentially even getting hurt, etc., playing video games, which is in a more protective environment. And so much of this, like we were talking about, is so integral into growth and development, especially those motor skills, but the social skills, and how that really is very important for us as a society, but then also for our mental health. So another really key component in mental health is serotonin. Serotonin is the hormone that is essentially like our happy hormone, and similar to dopamine, but different, but more happy or excitatory. And so we have serotonin that typically is released when we wake up in the morning, and then that works with melatonin, which helps us fall asleep. So serotonin is something where one of our number one things when we medicate for anxiety and depression, OCD, etc., a lot of our mental health disorders, we're medicating with what's called serotonin reuptake inhibitors. And that is to increase the amount of serotonin in the brain. And so a lot of the medications that are designed to support mental health are to increase serotonin in the brain. And so how else are we not getting serotonin in our environment that may be something where we're seeing a global or a more wide-reaching, not an insufficiency, but we're seeing potentially not enough serotonin and therefore needing to increase those. And one of the ways we can get serotonin is by seeing the sun, which our world is it revolves significantly around being inside. Kids go inside for school, we're inside in the house, adults work out inside at the office. And so how often are we really truly going outside? And going back to the topic of kids, it's like it used to be playing outside or riding your bike with your friends and things like that. But as we shift more to a world that is more digital and more video game based, or it's more scrolling based, or more focused on, watching and binge watching shows and things like that, we're pulling ourselves inside so much more, and we're directly inhibiting our ability to see sunlight and our ability to really increase that serotonin naturally from being outside. Not to mention the fact that our social situation and our social interactions could also stimulate a sense of community. And a sense of community is one of the most important factors in mental health, is if you feel like you have a strong sense of community and community support. And so that's something that is very integral in your mental health, is that sense of community. And so we want to, one, go outside. We want to be in real community with other humans and not necessarily just on our phones. And the fact that social media is not a true form of community. And so it actually makes us feel more lonely than actually feeling engaged in community. It makes us feel more lonely and isolated than really achieving the benefits that you would get when you're in community. And so what's really going on? Well, that's things that we're seeing and what the research is saying. But really, where do we go from here? What could be some practical tips? And some practical tips as parents is really saying, how can we set boundaries around technology, especially for our young kiddos? And then as they go into those teen years, well, we have them. What are some boundaries we can set to teach them good habits and to really foster that growth and development, especially in the ages where it's so important? And so that's something for you to understand what's best for you and for your family and for your kids. And how do you want to best use technology? Because not that technology doesn't have benefits. There are a lot of really cool things that we get from technology. Like the ability for me to even make this video right now is because of technology. And so I think oftentimes we can talk about all the negatives of technology, but there are a lot of positives as well. So what is best for your family, and what boundaries do you want to set for your kiddos or your teens around technology and more specifically around social media as well. And then for adults, for you, what are your boundaries around social media? Are you tracking when your phone tells you how much screen time you've had recently? Are you really setting boundaries around how much you allow yourself to scroll or yourself to numb out potentially by going to Netflix or to social media or even to YouTube? All of these different ways that we can be coping with our stress. And if we are going to these things for stress, how else are we supporting our mental and emotional and physical health? Are we doing things like chiropractic or meditation or movement, exercise, drinking plenty of water, getting plenty of sleep, etc.? How are we managing our minds and our bodies so that we can support ourselves so we don't have to find these other things as really coping mechanisms or distractions? And so bring your awareness to potentially how much you're using technology, potentially in what ways you're using technology as a distraction or a coping mechanism, and what other ways you are supporting yourself for your mental and emotional health, and potentially how you may need to incorporate more things for you to what we call in chiropractic push the brake pedal, which we have stress, which is the gas pedal, and relaxation is the brake pedal. And so in what ways are we incorporating the brake pedal? And one of our favorite ways to push the brake pedal is chiropractic adjustments, especially here at Sun Life Chiropractic. And we can get you scanned and see how your nervous system is doing, how stressed out you really are. But really take an inventory and say, how am I supporting my body and what boundaries am I setting around technology? Especially when mental health, really, this is a very important topic and a lot of people are really struggling. And one of the most important things that you can do is you can be a friend to others. And so reach out and support others. I think oftentimes we see social media highlights and it makes us feel lonely. It makes us feel isolated. And then it makes us feel like everyone else is so happy around us. When in reality, everyone's a human being and everybody has their own heart. And so everyone is going through something. And so really, instead of focusing and feeling like, oh, well, everyone else's life must be great and I'm really struggling, reach out and have real community and real friends, because oftentimes you'll realize that everyone's life is not what they put on social media, and that we can really find strength in that community to support ourselves and to support others. And when you support others, it actually makes you feel fulfilled in so many ways. And so continue to support others and reach out, be a good friend, be a good family member, and take care of yourself as well so you can be a good family member and a good friend. And one of the best ways you can take care of yourself is by prioritizing your own mental, spiritual, and emotional health. And so come on into Sun Life Chiropractic and let's get you scanned and let's start giving your body some TLC. Comment below if you have set a boundary for technology for either your kid or for you that's worked for your family, and give someone else a good suggestion on how they can also set healthy boundaries.